Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Aya Soma, and I'm here with Aya Brahmavara.
Hello.
Delightful bhikkhuni that is spending the vassa here at Empty Cloud with all of us. So tonight we will be doing monk chat or female monk chat. Since we've had a few male monk chats, it's good to have just some female monk chats every now and then. And tonight will be one of those. So you have your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have on Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And we'll try our best to answer them. And for now, hello to Spook Waters, Mary. Hello, Mary. Good to see you. And Anumadana Satu for your kindness yesterday of bringing us to New York City to see a beautiful exhibition. We're very grateful, still delighting. And hello to Bill, Wasabi, Manal, Karuna. Good to see you. Eric, Geeta. Welcome to all of you friends, and maybe I'll start monk chat by asking Aya B, how is she doing here for the vassa?
Very well.
First vassa at Empty Cloud.
Yeah, my first vassa at Empty Cloud. Thank you very much, Aya. And my second stay at the monastery. Last time I was here was in the winter, and it's very different, of course. And I was actually very surprised when I arrived that it was so hot and humid. In the winter we had snow and ice, and so it's very interesting to see how things change with the seasons. No place is ever the same, is it, even for a moment? But it's very striking when we come at different times of year to places. I'm enjoying the vassa very much. We're doing a lot of linear studies and really exploring our rules in depth, both the bhikkhu and the bhikkhuni rules, which are slightly different. And so we get a chance to also compare and contrast a little bit. But we're looking at the rules together in the spirit of seeing how all the rules apply to all of us. So actually kind of, in a way, stripping away the gender aspect and just looking at the rules as human beings. And I found that to be very valuable and helpful and expanding, because then there's more rules for all of us, but the rules are relevant for all of us as well. So we're having a very rich time and a time for study. The vassa traditionally is a time for meditation, a retreat time for some. We've got Aya Suwajana on retreat since almost the beginning of the vassa. She's been able to be on retreat, which is wonderful, because I know that many of you will be aware that before the vassa she was actually here, kind of holding the fort for Ayasoma, Bhante Siddhartha, while they were away on Tudong and in Italy. So it's great. She's upstairs in her room, and she's been on retreat for, I think it's almost 6 weeks now. She is emerging on the moon day, the Aposta day, which I think is on Tuesday.
I believe so.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it's a new moon on Tuesday, the Aposta. So she'll be joining the community, then she'll be contributing to our Vinaya studies, which will be very good because she's quite a senior bhikkhuni. So she'll have a lot of experience, I'm sure, to share with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aya. Who's also, well, technically a junior bhikkhuni, but actually a senior monastic. So you've been in the ropes for quite some time, like over 20 years now.
Yeah, baby bhikkhuni though. Only 2 vassas bhikkhuni.
But she was definitely a Buddhist monastic for quite some time. So, so she pretends that she's junior. It's a lot of perks in being junior. So she's like totally playing that card, and I'm totally like, no, you're not junior. In monastic life, we have it all the other way around. We're kind of like really trying to go back to the good old samanera and samaneri days, like novice days, when you have a few duties and a minimalist lifestyle, and less responsibility. And hello also to our friend Richard and Jia. We don't have any questions popping up yet, so this might be like the shortest monk chat of the history of monk chats.
Hi everyone.
Oh, hello, Joe. Good to see you. Thanks for the digital flowers. And hopefully we'll see your face soon. Joseph, Joe was here for residency not too long ago. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. All right. We'll give you a few more moments to type in questions. And if not, then we'll have an early night, which is kind of nice.
I could ask you a question, though, if it's okay.
Sure.
I was wondering if I don't know, maybe you all are very aware of what's been happening in Italy with Tudongs and practice in Italy. I don't know how much people are aware of that, whether there's anything to share of I don't know, how things are at this point and after your recent, time in Italy.
Thank you. Yes. Well, it's very interesting. Actually, I was speaking a little bit about that last weekend here at Empty Cloud. I was actually reflecting upon the fact that, this day and age, actually, whenever we look at people's sort of travels abroad, we're plugging into their social media. And so we see a lot of like nice pictures and a lot of like great time happening. And so I was thinking, oh, how interesting. To a certain degree, actually, we're kind of doing the same thing, or I'm doing the same thing because I do have an Instagram account and I did publish a lot of like pictures. And so whenever, kind of out and about, people always ask me about how is like I've seen the beautiful pictures in Italy. It's like so great. And I think sometimes folks have this idea that it's kind of like just this pleasure trip that I so much during Italy, but in reality actually started a little bit as a it's another one of the stories of old age, sickness, and death. So to a certain degree, it's happened because my parents are getting older and older, and so I have to go back more and more often. And as with everything in samsara, I feel like suffering also brings the opportunity. I mean, either it drives us completely insane, as the Buddha says, or it also pushes us on a spiritual search, which I was already on. But I have to say that now it has become like it got a new dimension to it. So as I've been going to Italy to see my parents, then also a lot of other opportunities for Dhamma practice have arisen. And also I kind of realized that my homeland is like a sort of perfect place where to go wandering. And so to have a bit of a more kind of lifestyle and practice, a little bit more similar to what we see, what we read whenever we open the Nikayas and read the suttas. And so that has given actually a lot of opportunities personally for practice to have less obstacles in terms of imagination and more kind of a practical experience of also the precepts, which has been really beautiful to see them, in a context that is a little bit more old world rather than new world as here in the United States. And then also forging all these connections. And I've had the pleasure and the privilege to also travel with Ayabi last fall, and this fall we're going to do it again. So that will be a lot of fun, and we've been connecting with a lot of Italian folks interested in the Dhamma, so that has also kind of come into being. And very interesting how these kind of as usual suffering kind of creates this also opportunity to develop and to eradicate suffering, right? There's no eradication of suffering without understanding that we're suffering to begin with. And it's been also very interesting, I have to say, going back home, where I have obviously more attachments because I was born and raised there. But at the same time, now I'm not a lay person anymore. I'm a monastic, and I've been away for quite some time. And but my memory, is from like 15 years ago. So I have a I was also noticing how the mind is so resistant to change. And I was kind of surprised that things had changed 15 years. And I'm like, how is that possible? That's really odd. How is it that my parents now are old? How is it that now I'm in middle age, And I'm like looking at my like people that are my parents' age, and I'm like thinking that they're my grandparents, but they're actually my parents' age, and people who look my age thinking, these are kind of like old parents, and then I'm like, oh, they're my age. Oh, wait, I am an old parent. It's very interesting how the mind gets fossilized, especially if you've been away for quite some time. So that's been all great opportunities to really look at the Dhamma, really.
Yeah, totally. I really share your cognitive dissonance around age. Like it really, every now and then. I just had my birthday. I just turned 59. It's like, 59? Me? 59? What? It's so bizarre. And my parents also, every time I see them, they're a little bit older. And it's like, wow. I think I don't really perceive their age at all, actually. I think for me, they're always mum and dad. And even though the bodies are much older, I'm not really relating to them as older people, which is probably a very good thing, But actually, they are in their 80s. And it's just bizarre. The aging process is really bizarre. This trajectory that we have, this life trajectory, it's something else, isn't it? And I think the mind is not really in the same way aging. In a way, it's timeless. And so there's the dissonance, because the mind certainly isn't 59. The mind is no age, So we can feel kind of encased in something that's not really fully identified with, and that's a good thing to observe, and just to see the suffering, as you say, I also, that's inherent in this. It's really something to look at that, to look at the life journey and how much suffering there can be, especially as we get older.
Yeah, it gives a whole new dimension. So I'm very grateful. I have to say, at the very beginning, I was a little bit complaining mentally, maybe also verbally here and there, in the sense that it also, because actually all these trips to Italy have created also these sort of new opportunities of practicing in different ways. I was kind of like thinking, it's really unfortunate that my parents are actually so old. Like I wish they had me a little bit younger, so I could have more time, to kind of focus on my practice. And then I had to actually really also look at that, this idea of focus on my practice, which is not terribly different. Maybe if I had been a layperson going like, focusing on my job, focusing on my priorities, and the sense also, instead of, the story of the Buddha, actually, that is really, really beautiful, really touching, of how, what, sort of pushed him to actually become a renunciant, which is really fully understanding, actually, old age, sickness, and death, like really understanding the implication of how intoxicated we are with youth, how intoxicated we are with health, how intoxicated we are with life. And so I think I hadn't really realized actually how much still I'm intoxicated with youth, life, and health, until I actually had this experience that, obviously, being a continent away from my parents, it's kind of every moment of their old age is a little bit more sudden than it would be if we were in the same place. And so it's been actually like a really beautiful gift. And so anyways, painful gift, as Samsara provides, but also very interesting to really go into deeper sort of, the real intensive vipassana, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Super. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable. And we have some questions, actually quite a few, that have appeared while we were literally doing our monk chat, our own monk chat. And Actually, maybe should we invite also then Buddha?
Yeah, do you want to join us, Venerable? Yeah, why not?
Have
Shall I move along?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, we have a third Samana, Venerable Buddha, coming to join us.
Excellent. Surprise! We're 3 now.
Hello.
All right, good to see you, Venerable. All right, so now we have a few questions, and Dharmika says, what is meant by boundless consciousness? Ayabi, would you like to answer
Sure,
that?
Ryan. You know, it's interesting, that sort of touches on just what I was saying about the mind, you know, the nature of the mind, that it's not, doesn't have really a chronological aging quite the same way as the body, does it? It's has a quality of timelessness. You know, we remember when we were 10 years old, and there we are, 10 years old again, you know, in that memory. And the mind can move, the mind can travel all around the world, the mind can even move to different planets, different stars. The whole universe, you know, is laid open for the mind. And sometimes when we're practicing meditation, that can be a problem for us, because we don't want the mind to be jumping around all over the universe, but it will tend to do that. So this capacity of the mind, it's not limited. What I'm really saying is it's not limited in time and space. It can transcend time and space. And so this is the quality of boundlessness. It also has certain abilities that are to access or to rest in states of mind that are boundless, such as love, loving kindness, compassion, to rest in joy, boundless equanimity. Again, you know, we can train our minds through meditation practice to focus, to be one-pointed, and to bring up any of these divine abidings. And we can really feel how possible it is, we can experience how possible it is for the mind to expand into these states. So we can be like the gods, literally. We can bring out the quality of metta, loving kindness, and we can radiate it forth, you know, in all directions. The Buddha said we can go 4 cardinal directions, and then we can go above, we can go below. The point is that we can radiate love, and there's no limit, actually, to the extent to which we can do this. How amazing. So this mind has a quality of boundlessness, and in many different ways we can actually use this in our practice to develop the divine abidings that I just mentioned: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. We can develop these boundless qualities and let them radiate forth for the benefit of all beings. And we can recognize when we really turn the mind on itself, you know, see the mind with mind, we can recognize the boundlessness that's there. So I hope that's an answer for you.
Sadhu, thank you, Venerable. And Mary asks, can you tell us the meaning of your names? Well, Ayabi, since it's in line with what you were talking about earlier.
Funnily enough, everything connects, doesn't it? Really, this is another quality of the mind, is that it can make connections. We can see how everything is connected, and the mind will almost automatically do that for us. Well, it's easy at this point because because my name means, Brahma means God, creator, God. In the Hindu pantheon, you know, you have Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver aspect of divinity, of God, and then Shiva, the destroyer. So there are these 3 faces of God. It's really fascinating to consider this, because this really is like a description of reality, that there is a rising, there's things arise, they last for some time, and then they pass away. And so we humans have created our divinities, which manifest those qualities. And so Brahma means creator, God, and Vara means something like excellent. It's like the name they give to senior monks in Thailand. We call them pra Ajahn. It's the same word. Pra Wara means excellent. So the name in its sort of, I mean, what does the name mean, Brahmavara? You could say, this is my name, Brahmavara. It means something like God is excellent, or it means something like create excellence. It means it's an encouragement, basically, like all of these names. And the way I take this encouragement is to create the best. So to create good conditions, create the conditions for liberation, and to create excellence in terms of whatever karma is unfolding here, whatever's happening, can I bring out the best in this one, the best response, the best attitude, and so forth, which usually, of course, is an attitude of letting go and also developing kindness, I would say. So I take my name as a huge encouragement. It's like, come on, you can do this, and to develop the good qualities and support all beings in that way. So that's my name.
Sadhu. Well, you're definitely living up to your name. And Venerable Bhatta, do you want to talk about your name?
Yes, my name is Buddha. It means, well, first, Buddha was the name of a young boy who, his mother was awakened, and she was a disciple of the Buddha. And there's a poem in the Therigatha, which is a collection of poems from the elders. There were elder disciples of the Buddha. And the Therigatha is the elder bhikkhunis, so the female monastics. And the Therigatha is the elder bhikkhus, who were male monastics. And these were not all, but mostly their poems, kind of rejoicing in their awakening experience, rejoicing in their practice, in telling the story of their practice to kind of encourage and express in a poem what it was like to suffer and then attain awakening. And there's one of these poems in the Therigatha between Buddha and his mother, which is just called Buddhamata, which means mother of Buddha. And she says she had she gives her son Buddha a lesson, saying not to get entangled in the world and to not to get trapped up in the trappings of the world and come back to suffering. And she kind of encourages him with this sense of urgency in the sense of samsara and spiritual practice. And it turns out that she had practiced the Buddha's teachings and she had escaped suffering herself. And so Buddha recognizes this in his mother, and he was very young at the time, and asks her if she is speaking from experience and escaping the suffering of the world, of being completely unentangled with the world. And she says that she has been. And she kind of urges him on to practice. And there's then his own poem in the Therigatha where he essentially thanks his mother for urging him on and says that he realized spiritual awakening because of his mother. So after ordaining at a young age, and then seemingly went on to continue to be well known because we have his poem and his mother is also known. So that's the origin of the name, Buddha. And then as for what it means itself, Buddha means, it's related to, in some of the blessing chants, you hear words like pavadhati or chataro dhamma vadhanti. So it means to grow. As a verb, it's to grow or to increase. And Buddha means something like grown, so matured. And it can mean age, it can mean old. So physically an old person, they're grown, they're matured. It can also mean someone who's grown in the sense of they're venerable. So it's like a title, or it can be someone say, oh, they're very grown, they're very old, mature, they're very venerable. So it can have that sense of kind of maybe someone who's experienced. But it also means growth, so increasing or growing. So sometimes they'll say, oh, this is growth in wisdom or growing in wisdom. So it means both grown and matured, but it also means the growth itself, the increasing itself of certain qualities. So I kind of take this as maybe the young boy Buddha, he was very young, and he was growing, and he had all these qualities that he was growing in and maturing in from his mother. So because he was so young, oh, he's growing. But he was also grown because he attained awakening and had such deep insight when he was very young. So I kind of look at both of those senses of the word and the story of Buddha and his mother, and that's where I kind of derive some inspiration and meaning from it.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Venerable. And my name, well, it was picked by actually Bhante Sudaso, who knew that I really liked this poem from, well, I actually like a lot of the poems from the Therigatha and from the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, but this one was one of my favorites, and it was the poem of Bhikkhuni Soma, so the enlightened one, enlightened disciple of the Buddha, so that it's present once again both in the Therigatha and in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta. And the name actually has different meanings. One of them is moon, and the other one is actually the name of psychedelic drug from the time of the Buddha. But I'm not named after the drug, nor actually necessarily after the moon, but rather it's after the enlightened disciple. And her poem is about her meditating in the forest, and at a certain point, Mara, the evil one, comes and tries to distract her from meditation, and he starts saying how, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a waste of time what she's trying to do, because it's something very difficult to practice the Dhamma and to do something that essentially even wise people have a hard time achieving. And so he's like, well, you know, women with their little wisdom really don't have a shot at this. So what are you doing there, wasting your time? And since she's fully enlightened, she understands immediately that it's Mara, and she's like, just talk to the hand, and and basically gives a teaching on anatta. So saying, what does it even mean? Has womanhood have anything to do at all when the mind is concentrated well and sees right into Dhamma? One who thinks I'm a woman, I'm a man, or I'm anything at all creates the conditions to be addressed by Mara. So creates the conditions for the imposter syndrome, it creates the conditions for insecurity, it creates the conditions for fear, it creates the conditions for this whole big massive suffering. And I remember actually reading this poem and, you know, going like, oh, finally, you know, after all these like sort of kind of unenlightened rumors that we hear in Buddhist circles sometimes on, you know, the idea of what it means to be a woman. And I was like, this just sounds so not, you know, in line with the teachings of anatta. So then I remember encountering this poem and going like, finally, someone that actually spells it out. So that's why I really loved that poem. And Bhante knew, so he told my Samaneri preceptor, and was expecting a really, really long, horrible name. And he said it was this like really short, very easy, simple to spell name. And yeah, it took me like about 25 years or 30 years to get used to my birth name, and like 5 days to get used to my monastic name. All right, thank you. And Bill asks, what is the best part of being a monastic? Venerable Aya Brahmavara.
What is the best part?
Well, she's a god, so she's having a good time.
Oh, gosh, that's a really interesting question. I just see what comes to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't have to think about my hair, and I don't have to choose what to wear. What a relief. I can just get up in the morning. I don't have to do anything with the hair, and I can just put the clothes on, and that's lovely.
Atu? What about you, Venerable Vada, new to the robes? What are you enjoying so far? It's the best thing.
I think the best thing about monastic life for me is just feeling that that I'm in the form and the conditions that are what the Buddha created for attaining awakening, and having the supports of essentially his wisdom, but also of his air, being his air in terms of receiving what he established. There's a sutta actually in Majjhima Nikaya where the Buddha tells the monks, be the air in my teaching, not the air in my material gain. And he gives a simile in the teaching, but essentially what he says is that because the Buddha is very famous, because he's very well known, and many, many people respect him, because you wear this robe and you're a monastic, you'll be given food, you'll be given shelter, people will venerate you, people will respect you and appreciate you, and they'll shower you with many material things. Not always, sometimes it can still be difficult, but you have that privilege of, if someone's just wearing normal clothes and they walk into town with a bowl, it might be very difficult for them to get something. But if we do it in this Buddhist robe and we're practicing as the heir of the Buddha, as a monastic, then it's a lot more easy. It's a lot more it's a lot easier to be given material things. And the Buddha essentially says, even if you have the opportunity to gain material things, you're better off not even using them and just practicing my Dhamma. And he's using a little bit of a strong phrasing here, where he even says, even if you have the opportunity to eat, you should just not eat. You should just practice, because that practicing you then can be the heir of my teaching, not of the respect and the material gains that I have. So I think it's just being in those conditions where I can really be the heir of the Buddha's teaching in the way that he kind of crafted to make it that way. Because the first thing that the Buddha did, he became awakened, and then when he decided to teach, he went to the former people that he was practicing with, and he convinced them to teach them the Dhamma, to allow him to teach the Dhamma, because at first they weren't really convinced that he was awakened, that he had, they kind of perceived him as having given up because he was torturing his body and restraining his body to the point of deprivation. And then by the time he ate to decide to, okay, I'm going to eat food and I'm going to try a different way of practice, they thought, okay, he's given up, he's weak. So when he went back, they were a little bit skeptical. The first thing he does, he teaches them Dhamma and convinces them. And then he establishes, I wouldn't want to say he establishes a monastic order in the sense that we might think of it, but he establishes a group of renunciants who are going to practice together, who share the same values, who practice as renunciants, as what we call monastics. So samanas and papajitas, people who have gone forth from society and practiced together. And over time, during his life, he spent most of his time teaching monastics and continuing to craft the form and kind of advise them and help them to make it the most conducive to spiritual awakening. And so I feel in this form, that there's so much support for exactly what we're doing. There's so much also the material support that we get from the Buddha, despite having the Dhamma of the form and the teaching of the form that we can inherit. It's also the material support that we have. It actually becomes sometimes a Dhamma teaching, and wow, I need to practice to be, I need to be the heir of the teaching. So it kind of encourages you to constantly, your whole life is embodying this aspiration to fully realize what the Buddha realized, and to constantly have that of supportive form, supportive people around you, supportive conditions, supportive history. So that kind of support, I think, is what I find the best about it.
Sadhu. So what do I enjoy the most? Actually, I enjoy being a female monastic. That is actually my favorite part of being a monastic. And actually, to a certain degree, it's very much related to what the Venerables were saying earlier, obviously. But yeah, because as a female monastic, actually, you have so many less obstacles for awakening, so much less praise, honor, and gain that are bitter, vile, and obstructive for the attainment of awakening, as the Buddha says. And also, there's so much, blah 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 on, women in Buddhism and women in religion. So at the very beginning, actually, I was struggling a little bit. I won't deny that I was like, I wished, I didn't have a female body. And now I'm like, yeah, what a blessing. That's so fantastic. That's so great. Because of the opportunity of not getting distracted, the opportunity of actually, as Venerable Bhatta was quoting, to be the heir of the Buddha's Dhamma rather than his material wealth. So that really, I find it extremely helpful to stay just focused, to keep myself focused on the path, keep me focused on the right goal. So I really love being a bhikkhuni, so not having kind of the comfortable sort of lineage to rely upon and go like, oh yeah, these are the ways, the things that we're supposed to do. not questioning too much things, but instead, because actually everything needs to be questioned and sometimes also figured out to a certain degree. It's actually such an incredible opportunity to really investigate the Dhamma, investigate the Vinaya, and make a lot of progress towards awakening with a few distractions as possible. And good to see you, Venerable Gyanaratna, from, if probably you're in Brooklyn still. Thank you for your kind message. And Joe says, maybe talk about sharing metta and merits with non-humans. If there are aliens, then it's just more sentient beings to share metta, merits, and the gifts of Dhamma. It's a perfect question for our God, Bhikkhuni.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Joseph. You know, I don't know, people have done all these probability analyses, haven't they, about could there be alien life in the universe, and come to the conclusion that of course there must be alien life, other life forms in the universe, because it's so vast. And so why not? Let's include any and all alien species, life on all planets, everywhere in the universe. Not only that, but let's remember that the Buddha told us there are 31 different planes of existence here and now. And I take that as a very helpful teaching. You know, it's like in Christianity, Islam, we have the sense of heaven and hell, and then the human realm. And of course, we can see the animal realm. We're very closely connected to all the other species on the planet, plant and animal, but, you know, living beings. But also, you know, let's consider that there may be many, many realms of existence right here and now. Even though we may not be able to see beings in other realms, devas, kind of angelic realms, and the God realms, of which there are many, degrees of radiance and expansivity of mind. Let's consider the possibility, and also underneath, as it were, below, or in a more constricted way of being, there are lower realms, hell realms, and ghost realms. Who knows? You know, some people do know, because some people can see, you know, beings from other realms, but not many of us. And especially in the West nowadays, we don't tend to think in these ways. We don't tend to consider the bigger picture. But, you know, we can consider all those beings as well, whether they exist or not. If they do, let's share our merits and our loving kindness with them. And let's also, why not share the merits and share the loving kindness all through the universe, let it filter all the way through, and may all living beings everywhere be well and happy, be peaceful and free from suffering.
Sadhu. Excellent. And Jojo says, my mom is taking pain medication. I want her to switch to marijuana and eventually get her off the pain meds. I think she's just addicted to pain meds and not actually much pain. Is this approach okay? I don't think we're qualified to give medical advice. For monastics, actually, technically, she's qualified to give medical advice because she used to be a doctor in her previous life, in this life, but she's not a doctor anymore. Anicca.
That's right.
So all her qualifications, she tossed them out the window. So I don't think our venerable God here wants to pronounce, right? So
I could just say one thing,
yes,
maybe,
please.
you know, just appreciating that you have a situation here, you know, with your mother that's very concerning for you, so that she, you know, the sense of, you know, for whatever reason, she started taking these pain medications, and whether she needs them or not, they can be addictive, right? We can get into habits around all the different drugs in our lives. I mean, for me, it's tea, coffee, for some, you know, quite harmless perhaps, but these substances, even these, have an effect on the mind, on the body. And then there are so many different drugs that one can get over the counter and elsewhere. And it's just, you know, a question mark for you, I can see it's something that you're grappling with, and maybe the best what comes to my mind as an answer to the question is maybe to discuss and talk to her and see where she's at, and listening and supportive presence, relationships, probably the best we can offer other people. Often people will make their own decisions about what they do and their lifestyle and how they're living, but we can certainly be a good friend, especially with our parents, to very respectfully, listen, ask questions, and get to know what's actually happening, and see what she decides herself is best for her, day by day. So I hope that can be helpful.
Thank you, Venerable. And hello to some friends, Kim, Edward, Kumu, Ronald, and Bill asks, can you talk about the concept of non-self? Oh wow, this is like full on Dhamma talk, but I suppose maybe you were asking about it because I mentioned it earlier in terms of when I was talking about the origin of my name. So anatta, obviously, it's one of the central, you can call it concepts, central teachings of the Buddha. And they can be a little bit, for many folks actually, a little bit unsettling. We kind of like a lot of the things that the Buddha says, but then when it comes to, even the word non-self, also there's, oh, so what about this thing? What about that thing? And what about, so we start getting really, really struggling sometimes, especially because we sometimes take on a spiritual path, trying to look for our true self. And then maybe in our research, then we find Buddhism, and we're like, oh great, now this Buddhism is going to allow me to find my true self. And then we're like, wait, non-self? Wait, I was looking for the true self, and now it's the non-self. And so we can get very much lost in words, and we can start denying perhaps our experience. We can start denying. We can get very intellectual about this thing and start going like, oh, this is not me, this is not mine, and this is not who I am, but in a very intellectual level. So perhaps we're experiencing grief and we're like, oh, not me, not I, or anger. I remember, there's a lot of self-judgment, and so the anger arising in the mind, it's like, I'm not angry, and getting actually even more and more angry. And when we start instead taking a bit of a different perspective and actually looking at our experiences. So for example, when anger arises, or when grief arises, or when any kind of emotion arises, and we start perhaps taking a little bit of a step back and allowing ourselves to experience first, actually really look at what's going on. And observing, then we'll start understanding a little bit more what we're talking about when it's when we're talking about anatta, when we're talking about something that is not self, that doesn't belong to us. When something doesn't belong to us, we start looking at it in different ways if we're trying to figure out, to understand it. So we start looking at where it's originating, how it comes into being. And so then if we look at something, an emotion, for example, like anger arising in the mind, instead of saying, I'm the angry person, this is who I am, or if we have an addiction, for example, like gambling, and I am the gambler, I'm the horrible person. Maybe instead we can actually go like, oh, where is this gambling addiction coming from? Or where is this tendency of anger coming from? What are the conditions that create that? And instead of trying to, shift and change the result, what we're seeing, the effect of those conditions, which, once it's done, it's done. So it's you can't control the consequences, but you can control the causes. So then we start redirecting. We're like, I don't like really this effect of being an angry person, for example. Well, actually, I'm not an angry person. There's just anger arising in the mind. So while there's anger now, I can't do anything too much about the anger, except maybe not acting upon the anger. But I can do something else so that will have different consequences in the future. So if I kind of like prefer to have a mind kind of like I have Brahmavara, then I'm like, oh, maybe I should plant more seeds of kindness and love and godly seeds. And if I don't really like, the mind of anger, perhaps I should stop like planting those infernal sort of seeds that create this result. And then as we start taking on these new habits, we start seeing these new results, and we start understanding a little bit more what we mean with non-self, with anatta, with something that doesn't belong to us. And it's actually liberating, it's freeing, because whenever we think that something is ours, it's us. Yeah. If it's something ugly, we are really suffering because we're attaching. We're And if it's something that is very dear to us, then as soon as it's taken away, also we will suffer, right? But if instead we kind of understand actually this process, then it's liberating, it's freeing. And that means we don't necessarily have to deny, our experience, but we can understand our experience and shift our experience and choose something that is a little bit more beneficial. It's a little bit more comfortable. It's a little bit more nourishing, instead of keeping on going like, oh, okay, I'm this like total mess, but I just have to deal with it for the rest of my life, like this psycho person. And other people can take a break from the psycho person, but I actually am always having to hang out with this psycho person, which was actually a little bit when I had met Buddhism, I thought I was like kind of at that stage. I was like, okay, there's this psycho person here. Oh my God, I have to like learn how to tolerate it. And then I entered, I started learning the Dhamma. I'm like, oh, wow, actually I can change. Oh, that's incredible. Wow. So anatta actually was my favorite teaching of Buddhism. Had it not been there, I would have not started practicing, and I would not be here. So yeah. I don't know if the other venerables want to say something else about anatta.
That's great. Thank you.
And Bhavani asks, why do pets enter in our lives? It's very difficult to understand them. It's very difficult to take care of them when they are sick and dying. They won't cooperate and make us feel very sad. Venerable Banda? Oh, also continues with how to deal with this feeling of bad karma that we could not take care of them properly.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to have a sense of responsibility and feel that we can't fulfill it. So I think it looks like the first question, why do pets enter into our lives? Maybe is more rhetorical. I would say but just briefly, maybe it doesn't really matter so much if the main thing you're struggling with is how to deal with this feeling of guilt, essentially, this feeling of bad karma. I'm doing something bad. I'm guilty, and I'm a bad person, almost. Maybe what someone was addressing, right? You maybe feel, oh, I'm doing something bad, and maybe you feel like, oh, I'm a bad person, because you can't take care of someone properly. It's an animal. So why exactly they enter your life isn't actually too important. The fact is that they're there, and then you just see, okay, what is this experience, and what is giving rise, as I was saying before, what is giving rise to certain results that I'm struggling with. So maybe you're struggling with feeling like you're doing bad karma. And I would say the first thing is recognize with yourself that the fact that you have that sense of you want to take care and you feel like, oh, I don't know, I'm not doing this right, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this well enough. The fact that you have that sense means that that shows that you care. It shows that you have compassion in your mind. Because otherwise you would be doing things that are actually bad. For instance, you would be harming the pets and you wouldn't care. You would say, oh, it's okay. It's okay that I do this. You wouldn't even reflect on it. You would just harm it. So even if you are doing something bad, the fact that you feel like, oh no, this is bad and I don't want to do this and I don't want to feel this way, that means that you have a sense of conscience. And actually, these are two of the qualities that are essentially identical that the Buddha praised a lot are hiri and ottappa. And in Pali, they essentially mean conscience, so a sense of conscience about what's right and wrong. And ottappa it literally means burning up, and it's kind of a sense of shame, or a sense of when something is wrong, you feel oh, this is wrong, this is wrong. So it's when there's an unwholesome quality in the mind. So let's say you're very angry. Some people, they get angry and it's just they're in it and they feel right about it. I should be angry. I'm righteous. I deserve this. This person is wrong, and they deserve to feel my wrath or the anger that I'm feeling. And ottappa is kind of this sense of, let's say anger arises, is this feeling of being burnt up, like, oh, this isn't good, this isn't right. So I'm angry, but I don't feel good about it. So it's that sense of not good, and you want to, just like if your hair was on fire, you want to extinguish it. So ottappa is this sense of something comes up. The Buddha says you feel when you have this sense of hiri and ottappa, when an arisen quality comes into mind that's unskillful, you want to get rid of it immediately. So the fact that you have this quality means that you have a sense of conscience, and you have a sense of, oh, this isn't good, and you already want to get rid of it, which is this hiri ottappa. So I would say, oh, okay, you can just pat yourself on the back, maybe massage your back and say, it's okay. I have a sense of compassion and care for these animals. I have a sense of hiri ottappa. Oh, okay, I'm conscious. I'm aware of what's good and bad. And you can say, oh, that's good. So whether you're perfectly there or not, okay, you're on the path, because this means you're doing something right, where you're leaning in towards a deeper and deeper understanding of wholesome action. And that deeper understanding means that you'll start to avoid unwholesome actions, because you naturally understand, oh, I know that that's wrong. I know it doesn't feel good. I know it causes harm, and I don't want to do it. So you naturally won't do it. Right? So you're already starting with these qualities. You're already starting to develop compassion and deeper understanding and deeper wisdom. So I would just, maybe this feeling of grief, of maybe guilt or grief with yourself, nourishing the positive qualities that you already have and recognizing you're on that path, that's going to start to help alleviate that. Because the reality is, if you have done something bad, it's already been done. So what we need to work with is how we relate to the fact that that's been done. So really what we're relating to is the memory, because it's not actually, we're not doing that action currently, which means that if we feel bad about it, we're recalling a memory and we're kind of going over it in the mind and then giving rise to more unwholesome qualities, right? So it's really just a matter of relating to a memory is what we need to work with if you have done something bad. And in that case, you can just recognize, oh, I feel bad because I'm doing an action in my mind. I'm calling up a memory and I'm intentionally hurting myself. It's kind of like if you did something bad and then you're like, okay, you know what? I pick up this pencil and I'm just going to keep stabbing myself and it hurts. And you're like, how do I deal with the pain of this pencil? How do I deal with the pain? How do I deal with the pain? And then you just keep stabbing it, because the pain is coming from yourself. It's coming from the stabbing. It's not coming from, so sometimes we look at the pain and we're like, why is it painful? Why is it painful? And you keep stabbing, because you don't realize that the fact that you're looking and concentrating so hard is what's leaving this motion going on. You have to look at the mind. So turn your mind back and see, oh, I'm calling up this memory and then I'm stabbing myself because of it. But actually I'm stabbing myself because I have a sense of compassion and I have a sense of right and wrong and I want to do good. So wow, I do have the qualities of a good person. I just am a little bit not looking in the right direction. It's kind of like if you're a very good driver, but you have a map and you start following, the map is incorrect, or you start looking at the wrong part of the map. So you go to the wrong place. And then you think, oh, I'm a horrible driver. But actually, you were a really good driver because you followed the map perfectly and you got there. You just were looking at the wrong part of the map. Right? So this is what it's like. So we do something bad and then we actually are very good. We have these wholesome, amazing qualities, but we're just using them in the wrong way. We're using them to harm ourselves. So I would really nurture those good qualities. And then if you haven't done anything bad, in the sense that maybe you haven't intentionally harmed, it's just that you feel maybe your actions aren't good enough. The reality is that we can't eliminate other sentient beings suffering. So the Buddha says that this is the nature of existence, is that suffering it comes into being and it naturally ceases. It naturally will subside and calm and it will cool down like a fire. And the cooling of a hot fire is just, so cool. That's the cooling of suffering, but we can't cause that itself. There are certain conditions that continue to give rise to this, and those conditions, everybody has to take charge of the conditions that are giving rise to suffering. And so whether it's a pet or a human, we can't alleviate their suffering. We can just do our best, the best job we can to take care of them, to nourish them, to provide them with good quality, good conditions and happiness. But it's not going to alleviate all their suffering. So it's always going to be less than perfect. And so if you can't accept that, it's going to make you feel very sad. But if you start to embrace it and understand, oh wow, there is suffering here, but look what I'm doing. I'm just bringing happiness to it. Then you can start to feel very happy because you realize you're not powerless, right? You can't alleviate another sentient being suffering completely. Even having a body means it's going to get sick. But what you can do is, oh, they're going to get sick and that body is going to eventually die no matter what I do. But look, I can soothe it and make it less suffering. So just focus on what you're doing good already, and start to redirect your mind to start to see those wholesome good qualities. And naturally, you're going to start doing better and you're going to start feeling better. So that's all.
Okay, Sadhu. That's why he's called Bada. Old and wise. And Spook says, can you teach us what method you use when you sit? As in, what do you go through in your own mind? Personally? Venerable?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. There's so many different meditation methods. So we three would probably all have something different to say, and so it'll be interesting to see what we have to say. When I sit meditate, I generally keep it very simple. You know, I might start with taking a few deep breaths and start to then feel into the breath. So I'm starting to pay more attention to the body. And then I just let the breath become normal, and it's a very subtle experience, isn't it? The touch of the breath or the feeling of the breath moving around the body. And so I just pay attention to the breath. Anapanasati, awareness of breathing, is the name of the meditation technique. The Buddha spoke about it a lot, and I personally find it very helpful. So I pay attention to the breath, and then depending really on the state of mind, I'll gauge accordingly, you know, how to continue the practice. So for example, if the mind is very calm and peaceful, I can choose to maybe spread the attention throughout the body and really give time then to develop body awareness. If the mind, say, on the other hand, is very active, quite distracted, then I might focus more on a smaller area and try to develop some stillness, some samadhi practice. If there's any kind of negativity in the mind, I'll bring up loving kindness and just let that be part of the background kind of affect for that time. Wishing myself well, may this mind be peaceful, may this mind be happy, and by, you know, as is the nature of things, that is to wish all beings well and happy. So these are just some examples of different tools I might bring in. It all depends. And it's very interesting, I find, you know, every time I meditate, kind of stop and make time just to be present, there'll be a different experience. And it's often not what one would expect. And then it's a very, for me, vibrant and alive practice, because things are constantly changing. And it's like, okay, what's the situation right now? How is it? What's happening in this body? What's happening in this mind? Let's see how we can best work with it.
So, thank you, Venerable. Personally, well, similarly to Ayurveda, I also do a lot of mindfulness of breathing these days, which took me actually quite some time to be capable of even being remotely close to developing mindfulness of breathing. It was very difficult when I had entered the path to practice that, which is why actually for a long period of time, my main practice was mindfulness of emotions. That bit of a cliche as an Italian. It's a bit of a volcano of emotions. And now I'm actually like very calm and peaceful, even though apparently my other venerables think otherwise, but from when I started, there's a lot going on. So the breath was a little too subtle when there was a volcano going on. So that's why I basically kind of I decided to embrace it rather than to fight it. Literally looking at basically using essentially the instructions for mindfulness of the body applied to the physical sensations that I would perceive with the emotions. So looking at the body and how, for example, anger or how agitation or how anxiety would manifest in the body, and looking at that, the physicality of the emotion, and dropping every kind of memory, idea, or thought in relation to the emotion, and just looking at this physicality, this big chunk of thing that I called anger, for example, in the body, or anxiety, or whatnot. And then I would just observe it and look at it, and it's always very interesting because it's constantly changing, one can then see actually the quality of impermanence, the quality of actually suffering as well, the quality of the satisfaction of the emotion itself, and the quality of anatta, so the quality of impersonality, the quality of it doesn't belong to us. So whether I wanted for anxiety to be there or not, it was there. Whether, joy, if I wanted joy to stay or to go, well, when I wanted for it to stay, it would go eventually. So it just didn't belong to me. So you can actually really tangibly see the impersonality of all of that, and that cause and effect that I was talking about earlier. And that was so radically life changing for me, because it allowed me then not to take whatever I was experiencing seriously, to not take it like, wow, this is me, this is solidly there, but rather, once again, do the process that I was talking about earlier of redirecting the energy and the attention towards what I could control rather than what I couldn't control. And then from meditation practice, then, kind of evolved also in my day-to-day life, where then I was very much aware of when the emotions would arise, stay, and then cease as they were happening. And then I was capable of shifting my actions. I would then see, oh, actually there is a choice right now. I can choose whether to react upon this, this, whether it's joy, whether it's love, whether it's anxiety, whether it's, whenever it's happening, doesn't matter if it's quote unquote positive or negative. And I was like, oh, sometimes I would actually see myself intentionally deciding towards the unskillful because it was so delicious to do that. And the reason why I'm actually sharing this is still in the answer still in the question of meditation, is all of this is meditation. So all of this is, a method. So we tend to think, oh, okay, I'm only meditating when I'm sitting down or whatever, when I'm walking, when I'm actually doing formal meditation, whatever posture we choose, but actually should be meditating all the time. In fact, meditation, I feel like it's actually not the right word. We should be using mental cultivation. So bhavana, because that's essentially what we're doing, and that we should be doing it full circle. So if we're only meditating when we're meditating, and really we're not cultivating the mind, because it's kind of nice, and maybe we're giving up a little bit of stress here and there, which is good, but but we're not really, I don't think we're really actually doing what the Buddha is inviting us to do. So we're missing out on a lot of other good stuff.
Great. Actually, that was a perfect segue what someone was saying to my answer to this question. In terms of cultivating mental qualities and meditation technique and sitting meditation, and in general, just what is meditation and things. So my general method, my approach to meditation that I take is I take the Buddha's instructions. Essentially, this comes up all throughout the suttas. You see this many times, and it's not just necessarily taught. It's also kind of this constant background. So, for instance, there's a sutta where Sariputta says to the Buddha, he says essentially, master, if you want to call it like that. He says, "Oh, master, teacher, venerable teacher, I think of all the Buddhas in the past, of all the Buddhas in the future, of anyone who realized complete awakening, you're the best. And he's kind of saying like, I love you to his teacher. He's like, man, you're the best teacher ever, because he attained awakening. He was the Buddha's foremost disciple. Not love in the sense we might think of it. He was fully awakened. So, but he was essentially, it's called the lion's roar. And the Buddha says, wow, Sariputta, that's a very definitive lion's roar that you're saying. He says, do you know, have you read the minds of the past Buddhas? Have you known the Buddhas of the future? How do you know that I'm the best? And the Buddha's kind of telling Sariputta, it's a great compliment, but I don't really know if you're qualified to say I'm the best. Like, thank you, but, it's very kind of you, but kind of a little, humbling himself a little bit maybe, in a sense. And Sariputta says, no, I can't read. I don't know the Buddhas of the past, and I don't know the Buddhas of the future. But I can infer that all the Buddhas removed the 5 hindrances, established their minds in the 4 applications of mindfulness, and cultivate the 7 awakening factors for complete knowledge and liberation. And so this is something that you see. It's the teaching all throughout the suttas. We remove the 5 hindrances. The mind is established in the 4 applications of mindfulness, and the 7 awakening factors come to fruition. And when the 7 awakening factors come to fruition, knowledge and liberation comes to fruition. So it's a little bit technical and robotic. But essentially what this is saying is that certain qualities of mind, certain conditions give rise to certain qualities of mind. And that's the core of what the Buddha was saying. This is how you attain awakening. This is how you cultivate the mind. This is how you meditate, is you give rise, you let go of these things that are obstructing your mind from clarity and peace and stability and joy. And you give rise to these qualities. And when you have these qualities, when your mind is adorned with these qualities, so mindfulness, investigation in line with Dhamma, a sense of energy, a sense of rapture, kind of elevated joy, calm and tranquility and pliancy, mental unification, and then clear looking and seeing with equanimity of the whole situation. When you have those qualities and you're adorned with them, you'll naturally become awakened. It's a cause and effect relationship, right? It's not like, I want to become awakened. What do I do to become awakened? And I follow this technique, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then step 5 is awakening. It's more like I give rise to these conditions. And when those conditions are there, you see it. It's kind of like if the Buddha says it's like a chicken. If a chicken sits on her eggs, and then she says, may these eggs not hatch, may these eggs not hatch, but she keeps sitting on them, then they naturally hatch. And it's the same with the 7 awakening factors. And this is how I approach meditation. I think of it as, how can I give rise to these qualities of mind? And so that's both sitting and not sitting. So when I think of technique, what I do when I sit down to formally meditate, I more look at, okay, what hindrances are present that are obstructing my mind from naturally having these qualities? Because essentially the Buddha says that the hindrances don't have to be there. So once you're fully awakened, you don't have hindrances. And what we mean when we say the word hindrance, it means it's a hindrance to you just being completely 100% happy, 100% peaceful, with no obstruction. So a hindrance, it's an obstruction, it's a hindering you. So I look at, okay, what is hindering me from having essentially complete awakening, the conditions for awakening? Because if we had these conditions, we wouldn't need to do anything else. So I look, okay, what is stopping me? And I look at those hindrances, I try to, okay, how can I calm these? And then generally I establish my mind in the 4 applications of mindfulness. So generally what I do is I look at the body, I look at my experience. Okay, why is my mind wrapped up in the body? Why does it maybe want to go out towards different experiences or be somewhere else? And usually the way I do this is body contemplation. I look at my experience, usually in terms of the body parts or the elements. That's the most common way to do it. Sometimes mindfulness of breathing, but not so much, actually. Depends a little bit. Usually what I do is I'll look, okay, what is this body? What is this mind? Not separated from it, in the sense of why is it not just completely radiant and pure? So I'll usually start to look at the body. The way it can go a couple different ways. Sometimes it can be more of a calming, settling practice where you start to see with clarity, but it's much more calm. And sometimes it's more of a discursive investigating process. It kind of depends on what hindrances are there, right? So if the mind is relatively stable, relatively mindful, and able to keep in mind the experience, I'll start to just settle into, okay, what are these body parts? So sometimes I'll do, I'll just break down my experience, usually in terms of the elements, but with the body parts. So I'll look at, okay, what's the skin? I'll go deeper, the flesh, the sinews, the bones, maybe look at the liquids, and you start to see, wow, these are just impersonal elements. And the Buddha says, when you see that, the mind it turns away. And as you go through the elements, it's left with what's called the consciousness element, and it says it's radiant awareness. And then he kind of breaks this down, and then you go into the feelings. So this is the body application of mindfulness. Then you get to the feelings. Then you get to the mind. It starts to concentrate, and then you get into these awakening factors. That's generally how I approach it when I'm sitting. When I'm not sitting, I generally just look at, am I mindful? Am I clearly seeing and investigating? Am I energetic? So I always just look in terms of the hindrances and the awakening factors. And then usually I use the 4 applications of mindfulness when I'm sitting down to work through that. So I work through the body, and then I work through the feelings, and I keep going down.
Great, excellent. Sato. And Mary is asking, if I'm non-self, then whose backache is this? Smarty. Well, I have a question for you. If your body is yours, who you are, then why can't you remove the backache? Huh? Mary, if it belongs to you, then you should be able to control it, right? Right now, if this body belonged to me, then I wouldn't be having this like pain here on my leg. I would just decide to stop it altogether. Also, if this body belonged to me, then I would stop like getting it for it to wrinkle. If this body belonged to me, I would, could prevent from it to actually die. But no. We can't. We can't decide, for example, even to stop breathing just with the mind. We can't decide to stop our heart from beating. We can't even stop like the inflammation process of our body. If it starts malfunctioning, we kind of have to deal with it. So that's cause and consequence right there. But we can contemplate that, actually, as Venerable Banda was saying. So these are it's not that we want to just kind of go, okay, yeah, I understood, it's not self, whatever, done the work, okay, where's enlightenment? But rather, actually, we have to investigate, what do we think is who we are? What do we think is this body? Why do we think this body is mine? In the sense of like, what is ours? What is the experience of having a body? Looking at all the different layers that constitute the body. And then we'll actually understand that even though we thought we had a body, we didn't even understand what this whole body was. We didn't even feel most of the body, actually. Some people can't even feel their hands like this, right? So when they're meditating at the very beginning, we actually start realizing how we actually erase most of our experience. So even the things that we think we are, actually, it's just sometimes a complete fabrication. And you have no idea of even what it is. So yeah, that's the invitation also that the Buddha gives us, is to really investigate. What is this? So if we think that the body is ours, then if we don't have any legs anymore, do we still think we exist? And then if we don't have any arms anymore, do we still think we exist? If we don't have any hair anymore, do we still think we exist? If we don't have any breasts anymore, do we think we exist? And so forth. We can start cutting up mentally all our physical experience and still see if we exist or not. And then, well, we can start thinking about our mental experience. Yeah, it's fun. Buddhism is fun. So start exploring. And Spookwater says, regards to the 7 factors of enlightenment: attention, learning, energy, joy, concentration, equanimity, and tranquility. Very interesting translation. Can you please help me understand the difference between equanimity and tranquility? B?
I'll have a go. They are 2 different enlightenment factors, so they must be different, right? Okay. Tranquility, passaddhi, is a state of mind that is very peaceful, very tranquil, very calm, of course. Equanimity is something slightly different. I consider equanimity to be something more like an evenness of mind, or a sort of quality of not being ruffled or not being shaken by external conditions. So passaddhi is actually often, my sense is, it's an internal experience of peacefulness and calm, stillness. Equanimity is more like in relationship to external conditions in relationship to what's happening around us. It's the quality of mind that is constant, steady. It is peaceful, it is calm. It's also, my sense is, equanimity is also very awake, very alert. There's a quality of tremendous sensitivity. So what I notice is that the more equanimity manifests in the mind can actually open. It's just like Ayasoma was saying, we do tend to sort of screen out a lot of our experience. It's just, it's our habit. It's the way we are until we begin to expand into the fullness of reality. And equanimity is a quality that enables us to do this. Because if, for instance, I have backache, and it's really quite overwhelming, I can't really be aware of much else. If I can really investigate the backache, so closing my eyes and really paying attention to what actually is it? What's it like? Where is it exactly? And what's the quality that I'm calling pain or ache? What's it actually doing? It might be sort of throbbing or pulsing, or maybe stabbing here and there. There may be heat and so forth. And what's interesting is that the more we pay attention, the more we can experience the changing nature of this experience that I call backache. It's actually something quite fluid and shifting and changing. And the point I'm making is that when we really pay attention, we develop, as Samana Iwata was saying, we develop these enlightenment factors. As the more we pay attention to the backache in this example, we're allowing the hindrances to fall away. We're really focusing, we're not getting distracted. We're diving into that experience, and then these enlightenment factors will manifest. So there will be a degree of equanimity that starts to come in. And then in relation to painful experience, equanimity is that ability, and you'll know this, Mary, for instance, just mentioning you because of your question, you'll know that when you really pay attention and you sit with something, it will tend to be a little bit more bearable, just a little bit more bearable. The heart can open, and it can really just start to open wider and wider. So it's equanimity that allows this opening. And so for me, the quality of equanimity is not just calm, it's not just peaceful, but it's very sensitive, it's very awake, it's very aware, it's intimately experiencing reality. So that there is a reason why equanimity is the kind of pinnacle, the last of the 7 factors of enlightenment. It's this quality of unshakability, that's steady, that's even, whatever's happening in whatever situation. And it's also one of the Brahma Viharas, one of the divine abidings. And again, it's the last of the 4. It's the kind of peak of the divine abidings, of the divine mind, the godlike mind, this unshakable quality. So I hope that gives some of an answer to your question.
Sadhu. And Jade Miles says, why do you worship the Buddha? Oh, the Buddha is awesome. That's why. And the Buddha is essentially, we're trying to become a Buddha ourselves. So the Buddha embodies all those beautiful qualities of mind that we've been talking about. And the Buddha is our teacher. The Buddha has discovered the Dhamma, discovered the way that things are. So it's just already difficult to realize the Dhamma when someone explains the Dhamma so perfectly, just like the Buddha has done, like we're like, wow, his teachings are just so amazing, so great, so impeccably perfect. Like, actually, this is, me being an aversive type and with kind of like fault-finding mind. I remember really looking so hard to find some fault into the Dhamma at the very beginning. I actually put a lot of effort and I couldn't find any fault. And this just delighted my mind. So I actually started falling in love with the Dhamma and then realizing how difficult it was to practice this Dhamma, these teachings of the Buddha. And then going, wow, and the Buddha actually like discovered this, like actually did attain all of this perfections of mind without actually having, the Dhamma readily served like I am right now. Wow, he is really worthy of honoring. He's really worthy of respect. He clearly knows what he's talking about, so he's someone that understands this world and other worlds, like he understands everything. Capable of teaching anyone who wants to be taught. So yeah, these are just a few reasons. I can go on and on and on and on and on and on, and on. So I won't even pass it on to the other venerables, otherwise we'll be here till tomorrow. And Chronic Illness says, it's my first time here. I was happy to see Ayabi, who I know from Navadarini.
Hello.
Good to see you. And Bill says, your explanation of self where I am, I find it calming to realize what I am experiencing is just an experience. I just wonder what is experiencing these emotions or events. Who wants to answer this? I think I spoke a lot about that.
You said beautifully. I mean, what could I add to Ayasoma's discourse on not self? What is it that's experiencing these emotions? It's experience. Experience is experiencing. We don't have to make it more than that, We don't have to make it anything other. The sense of self is an illusion. It's a creation, it's a fabrication. And so it will fall away for us if we consider the Buddha's teaching on anatta. Let's remember, to bring in when we have a sense of identifying with our experience, or when we're kind of asking these kind of questions, it's like, let's bring in the Buddha's teaching and consider that he said there is no permanent, lasting self. There is nothing discrete here. This experience is experience itself, and experience itself is also changing constantly. So really, when we take on board this teaching, we can actually start to notice how ephemeral this sense of self actually is. Any aspect of my experience that I would call self is, when I really look at it, say, pay attention to this body. It seems pretty solid, it has a name even. People refer to it, as this one or that one. And I look at other people and I see the same, I see solid structures and they seem to last through time. I recognize the same ones that come and go and so forth, and people recognize this one. But when we actually pay attention and be the Buddha, seeing the Dhamma, wake up to the reality. For the example of the body, when we pay attention to the body, what do we actually discover? All we have to do is close our eyes and just be present. And what tells me that I have a body in this moment? What's actually happening? It's not that shape that I see in the mirror that I'm experiencing right now. It's a pressure here, some heat there, a pain here. There's a breathing happening. Do you see? It's a process, and things are constantly changing. And so when we pay attention in this kind of way, that sense of self does begin to deconstruct for us. And we can be prompted by the Buddha, right? We can be encouraged by the Buddha's teaching on anatta, or not self, to keep questioning. Whenever I have a sense of being somebody, in any way at all, whether it's the body or feelings, emotions, perceptions, thoughts, or consciousness itself, any sense of me and mine in that, all I have to do is look at it closely, investigate it, and see that falling away. How wonderful. Because as the sense of self falls away, we do get to lighten up. It is a relief to let go of illusion, to be living more in reality. It's like carrying a big burden, actually, the sense of self. It's not only a burden, but we can recognize there's suffering entailed in carrying that burden. It's actually a struggle. It's actually a lot of work. It's really hard work fabricating all the time. It takes a lot of energy to create in this way. And this is the kind of creation we want to let go of. And just feel the relief of that, feel the relaxation of letting go again and again of the sense of me and mine and myself.
Sadhu. Thank you, Aya. And Scott asks, how can we approach pressure from other religions? For example, spiritual views, which tells us that if we don't believe in a creator God, we're damned.
How can we approach pressure from other religions? Spiritual views, which says, okay.
His mom is here, and she's a Christian. So
no, she doesn't have this type of attitude. I think it's very common to feel this type of pressure, especially if you've been a Christian before. Some people actually remember. Maybe this will help if you just hear this type of thing is common. So I remember hearing of someone who they were told they encountered a Catholic group, and this group told them essentially that the end was coming soon, and it was coming at any minute. And when it comes, you better be ready, because if you're not, you're damned. And what this sparked was about a year of essentially an anxiety disorder. It created an actual anxiety disorder, not just a little bit of worry, but a serious debilitating disorder where someone was essentially incapable of relaxing, because at any moment the end could come. And they took this extremely seriously. It wasn't just, it's when someone says something to you and it just pierces the heart. They just really got it. Not in the sense of it being true, but in just, they took this on completely. And it was not even necessarily a belief, but it's that possibility that the end could be at any time. And if I'm not ready, if I don't have the right belief, then I'm done. Essentially, I'm damned. So I wouldn't feel alone. It's actually extremely common also for people who convert from Christianity. They don't believe it anymore, but there's just that lingering sense of like, what if, just what if I go to hell? Or maybe they're even Christian and they question the sense of hell, right? They're like, oh, I'm Christian, I don't know. Is it really right that you make one mistake in about 50 years, 80 years, maybe someone dies when they're 20, they die when they're 80. You have 80 years, and then 80 equals eternity of punishment. It's a little bit strange, right? Especially when God is so forgiving. It's a little bit interesting, right? All of our life, the whole teaching of Christianity, a lot of it's based around forgiveness and atonement. But it's like, well, there's a cutoff limit. And once you die after 20 years, 10 years, 30 years, there's just no more forgiveness anymore. It's almost like there's a switch in the language, right? One is you always have a chance. God loves you. You can always be forgiven. And then all of a sudden it becomes too bad, too late. Sorry. So there's differing opinions, right? So we recently learned that actually the Pope Francis apparently said recently, he's the Pope of the Catholic Church, said that he believes hell is real, but they believe it's empty. That he doesn't believe in the Christian doctrine, and this is essentially the doctrine of the Church in a sense, depending on how it's received. But the Pope has this type of power, so what he says has tremendous weight. And he essentially said that they believe that hell is there, God created it, but it's empty because He's forgiven everybody. So I'm not saying that this is I'm just trying to point out here that there's a little bit of nuance. So I'd say if you feel anxious, like what if hell is there? It's very common, and even Christians have this view. So even if you're not a Christian, and even Christians dispel this view, and sometimes they don't think it makes sense. Sometimes they think it makes perfect sense, and they think that people deserve to be in hell. So there's a wide variety of opinions. And so I would say maybe you feel a pressure because you feel like there's this tremendous weight. So much of the world is Christian, and they all say I'm going to hell. But the reality is so much of the world is Christian, and they have a wide variety of views. So the pressure is much less it's a lot less center than the mind tends to think of it, right? We tend to fixate on it like this is what Christians say, and Christians are powerful, and Christianity is so influential that it's worth listening to, right? So if we're walking down the street and someone on the street who seems maybe a little bit mentally unhealthy, they start yelling something at us, we don't quite understand it, we don't really agree with it, we don't tend to get anxious, right? If they say like something, I don't know, you're going to fall into an infinite abyss or something, some kind of statement like that of just eternal torment, it doesn't really make any sense if someone says it like that. But if someone who we really deeply trusted and we thought that they were very wise and very learned and had experienced deep spiritual truth, and they told us you're damned for life, we might be a little bit more inclined to believe it. So I think that this sense of pressure, it comes from the sense of authority. Otherwise, we don't feel pressured. It comes from a sense of the source is powerful in number, powerful in knowledge, powerful in influence. So maybe you start to look at, okay, actually, there's a wide variety of beliefs here. But sometimes that doesn't help, and you just have that lingering thought. And I would say you have to work with it by just being mindful and investigating. So we were just talking about the awakening factors, and the first two are actually mindfulness and investigation. And this starts the journey to awakening. So maybe you'll become awake and investigating your pressure from from Christianity, because you start to okay, what is going on? You start to investigate, and the reality is that you might be damned for eternity, and there's really no way of knowing, because until you start to realize the Dhamma and start to practice, and the only way to know is to investigate your experience and to realize that it's a hindrance to be anxious. You cannot see reality if you're anxious. You cannot see reality if you're nervous. You cannot see reality. You just have to see, accept, understand, investigate, and calm down, and a right joy comes up. So it might be a little bit, maybe not the most comforting statement, or it might be comforting, because the reality is that you have control over this through mindfulness and investigation, and you just have to work through it. It's just a gradual, slow, gentle process. Be very gentle with yourself. Just work through it, look at it, see it, investigate it, and really look at the emotional response that's coming up from drawing this to mind. I would say that's what you really mostly need to work with, because when the thought comes up, I might be damned. When that thought comes up in my mind right now, I might be damned. I don't have that reaction, because I'm personally not at the moment. I'm not struggling with it. So when that thought comes up, you don't have to be anxious. It's a type of reaction that is coming up. And almost always it's coming up because you want to be safe. So you get anxious because you think I might be damned. Well, I need to be ready. I need to be safe. Am I doing the right thing? So the mind's just trying to protect you. So just, kind of tweak that protective quality of the mind and that mindfulness. Just tweak it into an investigation, and just kind of be gentle and care for yourself so that you can start to let go maybe a little bit of that reaction. Always being gentle, being patient, being understanding that it's very natural to have this type of response. So I don't know if that's...
Thank you, Venerable. Sadhu. So we're just out of time. There's still a few questions. Maybe we can just give some really short answers so we can go through all of them. Joe asks, I've heard this term in the Tibetan tradition called objectless compassion. What is objectification? Oh, yeah, thank you. How does one cultivate non-objectification?
Remembering the Buddha's teaching on not self, remembering that when we objectify, we're creating that object, and so we can just let go of that creating and just radiate compassion. And this is why I think the Buddha gave these instructions for cultivating the divine abidings, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, that we just send them everywhere, send them out without any kind of discrimination whatsoever. There's a reason for that, and we can really contemplate, why do we have that guidance, and how is it that is the way to practice compassion? No discrimination whatsoever.
Excellent, Sadhu. And Kumu, in regards to your question, we'll do a Dhamma talk next week on the sutta, so then you can have all your answers there. And Hayang says, how do we as lay Dharma practitioners balance our world life pursuit, family life, career advancement with our spiritual practice so as to strike the middle way to progress successfully on both spiritual and worldly life? Is it very difficult to attain enlightenment as a lay Buddhist? Well, I would like to invite you on recollecting all the incredible practitioners, lay practitioners at the time of the Buddha. There are so many. Actually, it was beautiful when Ajahn Pasanno was here a few years ago. He actually invited us to reflect on how at the time of the Buddha there were more stream enters that were lay people than monastics. And then pause, and then he said, because there are more lay people. So it's absolutely possible, and it's absolutely feasible. And how do you do it? Just like they did, essentially by following the Noble Eightfold Path. Just keep on developing the path, and that's all you need to do, and it just brings you there. And Karuna, monastic cat cobbler, very good activity always, is which awakening factor is the one you're referring to as pliancy?
This was passaddhi, usually translated as tranquility.
Okay. And TJ says, what do you think about mindfulness meditation in clinical psychology?
Yeah, I think excellent. Let's bring in mindfulness practice wherever we can. It's useful for everyone in every situation.
Super. Okay, I think that was the last question. And lots of great appreciation, especially for Ayabi, as we do as well. Sadhu. Okay, so we can end the night with the 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well, happy and peaceful, and may all good things come to you. And we'll see you again, well, either this weekend, if you live close to Empty Cloud Monastery. You're welcome to attend the Sunday program as well as the Saturday evening meditation. And if not, we'll see you online next week.